Okay, so to keep us on point today, we'll go ahead and get kick-started with today's TMC web broadcast. Again, my name is Tom Gallucci, Vice President of Business Development with the Mortgage Collaborative. And we thank you for joining us for today's discussion, which is entitled Leveraging AI Throughout the Mortgage Ecosystem. And it's featuring our preferred partners with capacity, but also have some great subject matter experts within the network as well that are going to support today's discussion. I'm going to introduce them momentarily, but first I want to go through some quick housekeeping items for today's call. Just as a reminder, whether you've dialed in or you're connected directly via your computer, all lines have been muted for the discussion. And it's done not only just to avoid any background noise in your area, ensure that all our attendees can hear today's presentation clearly. That said, we do want these discussions to be as interactive as possible. So I encourage all attendees, please feel free to submit any questions that you have for our discussion leaders throughout the call today, and be more than happy to facilitate those on your behalf towards the tail end of our discussion. Now, how do you submit those questions? Well, that's great information to know. There's two ways to do that. If you're connected via the Zoom, on the bottom menu of your taskbar, you'll see both icons for Q&A as well as chat boxes. If you click on those, you can enter in your question, and I'll see it come through on my end and be able to facilitate that out on your behalf. And also a reminder, today's call will be recorded and will be available for playback. Attendees from today's discussion will receive access to both copies in a follow-up email that you should end up receiving tomorrow. To that point, should we run out of time and not get to address everybody's questions, I will make sure to capture all those on my end so that I can present those back out to our discussion leaders, just to be able to follow up offline with any answers to the questions that we don't get a chance to address today. So before we jump in, two quick plugs. TMC Connect is the host for this broadcast today, so I encourage everybody attending, check out the Mortgage Collaborative's member event calendar. It's going to show you ongoing sessions that we've got coming up in the future weeks for TMC Connect, and those are largely due to the great ideas that we're receiving from our lender members and preferred partners. So keep those great session ideas coming in. And lastly, be sure to check with your TMC member benefit advocate about our end-of-year virtual experience entitled 12 Days at TMC, taking place between December the 1st and December the 18th. A lot of great content, fantastic speakers, and kind of set up in a way that won't monopolize your day, and hopefully at a time where loan volume is a little bit more palatable for everybody. So we look forward to seeing you there in the month of December. But let's jump into today's discussion. So like I mentioned, being co-led by our partners with capacity, and I want to introduce our three discussion leaders for today's call. So first off, we have Jim Albertelli, CEO with Albertelli Law. Jim is the founder and CEO of the organization, founded the firm back in 1997 after practicing as an assistant district attorney in the state of Georgia. Also leading today's call from capacity, we have John Heck, Senior Advisor of Lending Solutions. John has a deep experience as an industry executive with understanding of complex platform technology, including AI, natural language processing, machine learning, iCloud, digitalization, as well as data analytics. So it brings a great resource of information to the call. And last and certainly not least, we have Katherine Campbell, Chief Digital Officer from Assurance Financial, proud member of the Mortgage Collaborative. In Katherine's role, she gets to oversee the digital evolution and growth, including three departments in particular on the consumer direct side, marketing, as well as IT. So a big part of her role is getting to select, implement, and integrate end-to-end digital mortgage solutions for traditional and online business models. So good afternoon to the three of you. Really appreciate the time and presenting on behalf of our members here for the Mortgage Collaborative today. So on that note, let's jump right into things. And I'm going to turn it over to John Heck to kick things off for today's discussion.
Thanks, Tom, and appreciate having the opportunity to speak to everyone. Just a case in point, I remember reading a technology study white paper last fall that was done by one of the top flight mortgage technology consulting companies, and they asked many questions about technology to all sizes of lenders. And the interesting thing was the majority of lenders were not really happy with their systems of record, whether it was servicing or loan origination, but over 90% said that they wouldn't change it because of the pain and suffering that goes along with it, but that they did want some type of an external IT, fintech, IA, something to help them gain operational efficiencies and reduce cost and reduce defect, et cetera. So, the nature of what we're talking about today is how you can integrate AI into, your systems of record in parallel to your systems of record. I think that's a key point. Each of the panelists, Katherine and Jim, will be asked 3 questions specifically. We're going to start with Jim, but before you start, if you could just paint, a 25 or 50 word overview of what A Law and its subsidiary divisions does and provides for the ecosystem.
Sure, no problem. First of all, thank you everybody for allowing me to come here and share some of my experience and knowledge in artificial intelligence. I will note with real intelligence that so far we're doing better than the presidential debate. No one has interrupted or caused, concern, consternation, or insulting. So maybe we'll save that later in our discussion. So a little bit about A Law and where we hit, and I'm sure you're thinking, hey, a lawyer of all people, like how is this even possible? Over my career, I have founded a mortgage originator and servicer. It was called Prio Mortgage. It was an early online mortgage company and servicer. I sold to Cerberus. It became First Key Lending. So I have been, in your space. I've also built several technologies in the mortgage space to help my servicing clients, help my origination clients perform better. And then I've deployed, artificial intelligence and machine learning, which I'll break down into some simple terms, just so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. Use that for portfolio retention and better origination decisioning, especially with a flood of orders coming in, so you can triage and be more effective. But essentially, A Law comprises InfoX technology division. InfoX is a data hub. Think about it as something integrated in your LOS, whether it's an Ellie Mae or Empower, or whoever it is, where we can deploy basically title services, valuation services, flood, tax, whatever you need through that data hub and right into your LOS to make you more efficient and effective. And then we also have in the A Law family, our call center. It does inbound and outbound calling, on which we've layered artificial intelligence and really developed a methodology to communicate effectively with borrowers in what is common for them, deploying technology to be more effective on the front end as well. And then doing something similar with chatbots and working on portfolio retention, an early artificial intelligence decision engine, an analysis using another provider, giving you some predictive analytics around your portfolio and how they might best want to be communicated with, whether it's social media, et cetera. So the family of companies is, everything from call center. It is a Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, no objection law practice in the United States and the Virgin Islands. It is 2 national title brands, and it's a technology company that weaves these services together and deploys them into your servicing system, whether it's MSP or it's Fiserv system or into your LOS. So that's kind of an overview of some of the technology and services we provide.
So the first question for Jim, and I'm going to read these questions for the edification of those that are just connecting via telephony, don't have access to video. The first question we want Jim to discuss is what are the benefits of adopting AI-driven process from a streamline and standardization of data standpoint?
Yeah, so when we talk about artificial intelligence, and oftentimes you'll hear it referred to as we're doing something with a robotic process. It's algorithmic, right? What does that really mean? It breaks down to a couple of things. The algorithm component is the if-then statements, helping you digest and standardize data, vast amounts of data that you're collecting, and break it down so you're most effective and efficient. So it takes some of the stuff it does is provide insights that individuals couldn't do. You couldn't manage it on a spreadsheet. The database is just too large, It also spots the trends, and those trends can then be bucketed into action items. The other thing that artificial intelligence does, which I think in today's society is so key to us, I mean, with everything going on socially, right? Thinking about transparency and inclusion. We like to leverage the artificial intelligence, the rules engine contained in a knowledge base, right? Outside your origination or servicing system, right? And let that rules engine run and do the initial analyses on your borrower and on the land that secures the loan, right? So by doing that and communicating through artificial intelligence, right? Doing it mathematically, algorithmically, you do a couple of things. One, you create great transparency. There is no, discriminatory bias in the method of ingesting data through artificial intelligence, like whether it comes from a chat bot, or it's a phone call, or it's an email, or it's social media. So you're going to communicate in something that is common to that borrower. Then you're going to effectively digest that data in the data set. You're going to do a better job applying your rules engine, and you're going to maintain the metadata in a distributed ledger from the standpoint of compliance. So you think about this artificial intelligence, it's going to raise the bar. It creates vast transparency, great efficiencies, and every one of your mortgage companies is developing so much information in your database on the borrowers you're interfacing with, the trends that might be tough to spot at a micro level, but you could aggregate, like really putting that AI layer in. And I'll talk about a company in the space John's very familiar with, but a company like Capacity, who can build a rules engine for you, ingest your data or your metadata, protect your private information, and then give you decisions that are transparent, that are compliant, and that are done at scale. I think hopefully that answered the question, John.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Katherine, if you could just take a minute and talk a little bit about Assurance Financial for those that are not familiar with your company.
Certainly. So I am the Chief Digital Officer, which is a relatively new role in this whole industry, right? And last year it was kind of like, I had this idea that we create this position because, all of these different technologies, we would be the polar opposite of Jim's company, right? We'd be the least technically astute part of this whole mortgage algorithm. And I think that would be very normal because we're about a mid-size IMB. And so this is a 19-year-old company. They started this, some people left Wells Fargo and decided to start their own thing 19 years ago. They have grown very methodically and conservatively and very successfully. And so having done that without ever needing to borrow against any initiatives they had, they decided to take some investments in 2018 and start this digital mortgage trend, like recognizing it as a real visionary goal, having no idea, of course, that today in 2020, it is an absolute mandate. So we were fortunate to get ahead of the curve. I have to tell you that I am so excited to be having this conversation because 2 years ago, I was at Digital Mortgage, first time for me. I've been in technology for 20 years. I was largely in San Francisco. So the mortgage piece of this is newer to me. So I attended Digital Mortgage to understand what was going on in the space, and saw a demo of Capacity and thought, the moment I'm done, I'm headed for that. And I thought I was way ahead of the curve. I'd still like to think we're largely ahead of the curve, but here we are now really needing this technology. So it's exciting to be talking about it already.
So picking up on that concept, thank you. We're all experiencing COVID-19. Hopefully it's there's a corner that we're going to turn at some point in the near future. But how do you see AI itself in virtualizing, the capability of virtualization being driven by AI, and how it's affected your company?
Let's take a little step back and look at where we are at an industry level, particularly from a lender platform, right, on where we are technically. And the initial goal of being, having a digital mortgage just 18 months ago was a point of sale system. If you could apply online, you had a digital mortgage, right? Even though that's the furthest thing from what a true end-to-end solution is. So when we look at the real KPIs of an in-process, milestones, what are the milestones? What are the in-process points that technology could possibly influence. Let's get that shored up. And in that, there's really a selection phase, an implementation phase, and then of course, where we hope we all are today in the industry is an adoption phase. People that are very early or just in that selection phase are really struggling to figure out what their 2021 looks like next year, right? So we are well into adoption with an end-to-end solution, including, e-closings and rolling into e-notes. And then hopefully Jim will go to bat for us this year with Ron, and, we're going to shore this thing up. Not that many people were ready to get outside of what could influence real efficiency, which is the in-process piece, and start to think of what would happen with something like AI that could influence the early origination, maybe even pre-origination, through the production, and then of course off into the sales side of things and the secondary market. And that's where we were looking to include AI. So when I started there in 2018, this young guy, he's a great kid, was walking around, and he had like stacks of like 5 pieces of paper he was handing each of several of the managers. And I looked at it, and there was a bunch of names and phone numbers. I said, but what is this? And he said, it's the directory. That's like, what decade are we in? Hand me 5 pieces of paper for the company. Like, I could not believe it. So I was like, okay, so first, we have a little bit of an issue with just our directories, but we can look at, making that digital. But then what largely happened from that, all of that directory information when you needed something became an email, right? And then you're in email jail, and that became quite a nightmare. And so what I really realized for us, the bulk of this initial communication, and we're newer with capacity, is really the pace of communication. To find somebody and communicate with them must be much faster. Today, more than ever, time is money. More than ever today in this industry, time is money. And it's very critical that we use some of the most simplistic integrations with capacity to make that possible.
Thank you. And it's ironic that we talk about, and I'll go back to the digital conference. The first one I went to, I think I counted the word transformation on 37 booths. Everybody was going to transform the industry, right?
Right.
So it's interesting, Jim, because you mentioned that one of your divisions is a call center division, but yet you're using AI to automate your help desk, your processes, and your decision makers, which really is you're automating what your people are doing today. So you're that much ahead, or you're on the bleeding edge of efficiency. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm actually working to put myself out of business, right?
There you go.
I just looking at the call center and thinking about the themes of which I go through, I don't know, well over 100 audits by financial institutions a year. So I always thinking about how can I create a better track record? How do I preserve my metadata? The information from the calls. How do I do a better job of having all of my human agents have the same requisite knowledge across the product suite? You might have, you've got private label, you've got Fannie and Freddie and Ginnie, right? And so making the right decisions and putting the consumer in the right bucket that fits, and again, doing so in a metrics-based way, where the communication methodology is consistent with how they communicate, right? So what you can do quickly with AI, and first, what's the most simple things, right? Okay, so we just heard about the paper directory, right? So when you think about what a wrap could do, interfacing with, let's say, just your Microsoft Office suite, and handle all of your calendaring, with artificial intelligence, looking for blocks of time, looking for rules, and putting people together. Finding themes in your email so that you're not in email jail, and routing those effectively. With your call center agents, like what we have, is being able to quickly access a knowledge base that has all the rules and regulations up to date at all times, so that your agent makes exactly the right call. If you take some of that functionality and you push it out through text or a hyperlink in an email, so that people come into the funnel, they can speak Spanish, they can speak Mandarin, they can speak whatever language that you can speak back to them effectively, and take some of those pain points out. Again, retaining the metadata for compliance. Now, some of the cases that might be brought against you in a regulatory sense go away, because you can prove statistically, numerically, and with data, how you've applied these standards across the board. So we're using it to do a number of things. Deploy the electronic capability, and speak to people where they want to be spoken to, Facebook Messenger, etc., looking at all of those different channels. 2, we use it to look at the rules engine. So digest the rules engine in a knowledge base. It's been done. It's like any of you lenders out there, all of those rules are already in a knowledge base. I mean, you could call Capacity, you could look it up, you could link up to them and be able to capitalize on some of that in nearly tomorrow. So great functionality, but that's how we're deploying. We're deploying it to guarantee transparency, to do a better job communicating with borrowers, being more effective, doing a better analysis, maintaining metadata for that analysis. And quite frankly, our lender just named us the #1, a call center resource among their vendors. It's a top 15 lender servicer. So we know we can do it, and we know we can leverage it, and you can too. One of the things I wanted everyone on this call to come away with is, that some of these tools can be cost neutral to you, that there are very definitive methodologies. The formula's already been written so that you can interface with your LOS or your POS system to a database like Capacity, where you can enter into ancillary revenue opportunities, like what we do with a number of mortgage companies now, where we have created title joint ventures for them, companies that will now fuel the growth, right? It's found money, it's found opportunity, and it's service delivery control. So we've done that successfully to help fund the creation of some of these data tools. So what I wanted you to come away with was, 1, it's not over your head. 2, you already have access to the data. You can be this is guerrilla warfare against some of the players. You've seen them. They've gone public. They've done reverse mergers, and you're thinking, how are we going to compete in the next wave? You have all the tools, and you just need to effectively deploy them. But AI may be the great equalizer, and that call center example is just one example of what we're doing. The second one might be on the front end title piece, where I run people's portfolios through a decision engine. I have a high degree of certainty on who will refinance, who will default. You can then review those loans. I also give you an insurable decision on all of it. So now you know that already the borrower's pre-qualified and the title's pre-qualified. So the long pole intent for you will just be disclosures. That's going to save you money on the warehouse lines. That's going to make you more effective. You could do that tomorrow and capitalize on it. These are just direct formulaic steps for you to take a technology and a revenue opportunity, bind them together and make yourself that much more competitive. Again, very formulaically, very real world. This isn't pie in the sky. And this is a way for you to enhance your business.
Great overview. And a couple of key points there. One, when you bring an external technology into your environment, you must have a cost-benefit analysis to justify it. It must give you lift, or it's useless. And many people have thought it's vogue to connect to these fintech pieces, but at the end of the day, there's so many workarounds that actually increase the labor cost. The second thing is, as Jim said, AI is a real equalizer because it has what we call tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is where machine learning comes in. If the knowledge base doesn't quite understand what it's being asked, it becomes an exception or a ticket, that's the word used in technology, and it can get pushed to somebody, an opener, processor, an underwriter, closer, and that person can fix whatever that exception is, and actually the environment learns what that exception was, so it's no longer an exception thereafter. So the tacit knowledge nature of AI, it actually trains itself or teaches itself, just like you're training a human being to be smarter in what they do. So, Katherine, we have a loaded question for you. And the loaded question is, how can you actually use AI to, in your loan fulfillment environment, to reduce costs, increase scalability, productivity per FTE, better customer service, et cetera? How do you see that being implemented? I think you're on mute, Katherine.
Sorry, there we go. Because my AI wouldn't shut up. Did you hear Siri going off over here? I'm like, sorry. So, this is a great question, and I love the way Jim put it, that this is not above your skill set, right? This is not above your pay grade, because something like capacity does all of the work for you. It is just exactly what you're saying, John. It's garbage in, garbage out. If you put good stuff in, you're going to easily get good stuff out. And so just tactically, one of those solutions, I mentioned the directory. Well, that's, knowing what somebody's number is when you know whose name to ask for. But as large as, we've all grown this year, and certainly we're no exception, it's now like, who do I ask for this thing? I'll get an email that's to me and to the Encompass administrator and to the director of our IT department, and saying, hey, could you please reset my password for Total Expert? It's like, okay, that's marketing. I mean, they just see technology as this big blob thing, right? They just can't understand. So to put all of these nuances for your particular company into capacity in an organized format, that when someone just conversationally says, I need to set my password for Total Expert, that knows exactly who it needs to go to. They are not having to figure out how to navigate the company. Because we really have two experiences going on here, right? So you have that internal experience, something like that. Who can reset my password? How many PTO days do I have? Remember that as long as there is an API connector or some capability to pass data, capacity can take that. So you can take your HR tool and say, what was Johnny's start date? Because I want to know how much I'm going to anticipate paying his commissions, prorated over some period of time. Or I want to know how many PTO days somebody else has left, or how many PTO days I have left. What's the balance in my 401k, right? So there is really very, very customer service friendly internal, as for your internal customers. From your external customers, this is the real deal, guys, because what even, let's say, a year ago was sort of a surprise and delight. Like, oh, well, I can just go online. I can just take a picture of this, my W-2, and upload it. I can just log right into my bank accounts. Today is an absolute expectation. And from the closing side, that's now the surprise and delight. Like, oh my gosh, I just signed my loan docs from my phone while I was in the grocery store line. I mean, that's just crazy talk, right? So it is these little surprise and delights that are novel to people today, because we've already refinanced and placed well over $1 trillion in business this year in this market, that we know the next time they do this, there's going to be some level of expectation around it. So what makes you a little better than the digital mortgage solution that they had last time? And so for people like us that are ready to go into this next phase, it's time to really think of the experience over the transaction. And so that is starting to say, okay, how can I make this even easier for you? How can you at any given time say, what am I supposed to bring to closing? How much money am I supposed to bring to closing tomorrow? They know I'm logged in. We might have an SSO. That would be a single sign-on with these tools. It would know exactly who I am, and it would say, you need to bring $34,422 to closing tomorrow. And so these very simple, and then even from the very beginning, John, you're right. How do you start to anticipate ROI? Well, what I know from the front end of analytics, Google Analytics can tell me how many visitors I had. I can start to measure engagement, and then a really long lag, right, from the initial visit to multiple visits until a conversion, and starting to look at how do we get all the way down to the toughest metric this industry, I believe, has yet to figure out with technology. And that metric is a CPFL. What is the actual cost per funded loan? Well, when you start driving traffic and have an engaging tool like AI, where capacity can engage someone and them say, can you do a VA loan in Texas, you know, if I have $10,000, and it start to drag you down a series of questions, and then your application link goes there, drives you into the point of sale system, gets uploaded into, you know, Credit Plus, Optimal Blue for options. You know, we're going to drive these people through potentially 11 technologies or so. They don't know that. We don't want them to know that. All we want them to know is this bot that I found answered all of my questions and let me complete my application and just sent me e-disclosures. This is cool. And that is something that Capacity has the ability to do.
Thanks. And a couple of things. Number one, you know, if you look at the cost structure that Katherine mentioned, when you look at cost accounting versus accrual accounting, you know, accrual accounting is the real cost of doing business. It's what is it really costing you with the people that are in your facility, you know, using your HVAC, using your telephone lines, overnighting things, you know, not just the labor and the allocation of their labor, but the time involved with everything. AI gives you the ability with certain segments of your business to do it 24/7, 365. There's no downtime for AI. The other issue is I use this term a lot lately. I call it bingo logic. And if you think about two salaried borrowers, it's a pretty easy transaction. So the bingo cards maybe are two. Once you have the data fields that you need in those boxes on the bingo cards, you have a decision capability. If it's a really complicated loan, then what you get are two things. You get one, you get the boxes that are filled, and you also get the errors that say it doesn't meet the particular guidelines. And it's not ever, in my opinion, going to replace an underwriter, but it'll take an underwriter from 2 decisions a day to 12 or 15 over time. And it will definitely, you know, auto process, because when that data ends up in a particular box on that bingo card, it will fire something else because it knows that it's there. It meets my guidelines, so I can go auto order this, get it back, review it, and see if it meets the next guideline. So there's so many little pieces of the equation that you can get lift from. And I'll never forget this. I had met with the CEO of a mortgage company who was a previous CIO of the mortgage company. And he asked me this question rhetorically, and it was probably the most, it was both facetious and esoteric. He said, everybody wants to digitize their business, but the darn investors want the damn documents. When the back end of this business is driven by data, which, by the way, is on the horizon, I can smell it coming. When that happens, to Jim's point earlier, if you're not doing business in a digitized, data-driven environment, it will be very difficult to survive. And again, reiterating what Jim said earlier, you can compete with the big players by controlling your marketplace, by gaining efficiencies with data-driven, digitized environments that you can bring these microservice providers in and just uplift your systems of record. So we're going to go back to Jim, and obviously what we know is coming in the industry. It's a $3 trillion plus industry, right? The courts are shut down. There's an election coming. Come January, there's going to be a tsunami of, you know, additional forbearance, loss mitigation, default management situations, REO foreclosures. It's just inevitable. It's the S curve that we live in this industry. So Jim, how do you see AI helping in that particular part of the industry?
Well, I think a couple of ways. That when we first look at, we're maintaining some customer data, people that are opting into, I'll say, electronic databases, like on an electronic lockbox of information where they're in it. There's a number of technologies that do this and that can work hand in glove with a mortgage service originator. What happens is you have a borrower in their circumstances. You have a property and evaluation, and you have the understanding that the title is basically done and clear in this borrower's name. So what we're seeing is we're seeing the monitoring of that information being an effective tool to provide automated decisioning to help that borrower. So, you know, they're in the home, they can't make the full payment, but because they've opted in and you're connected to the financial information, like let's say Plaid or another provider, you now can see that they're still getting auto deposits from a payroll standpoint. So you kind of got a verification of employment. You've got their money that's in the account. You've got their credit score. You've got a pre-qualified house value. Well, guess what? A refinance may work in that scenario. A deferment may work in that scenario. Or you're getting early cues from a lack of employment. You're using data. You're monitoring your portfolio. You see them falling behind in different areas. It can then spur your outreach. So you can set credit triggers and you can start outbound call campaigns or reach out electronically if they've communicated with you in email or text or Facebook chat in the past, whatever that methodology may be. So I'm seeing it really in a couple of things. Some of the things we're learning with our chatbot in the call center, answering all these various questions, increasing the knowledge base, and really helping decisioning on that end, working with borrowers that, you know, maybe at the end of their forbearance, maybe, you know, like I said, can't make the full payment. One person lost a job, but they still have income, might be available for a refinance or some loan modification. We're seeing AI making better and better decisions. Again, you know, from the standpoint of engagement, what you were just talking about in the last section, with all those questions you just answered around, you know, who in the technology department should I call? None of those questions make money. All those questions do is cost money. They cost time and money. People worrying about their PTO, people worrying about how much money's in their 401k, all valid worries. But to have your tool and your AI focusing on the money-making jobs in the operation, you can kind of see the ROI there. If you look at building a database, intelligent database that works effectively with your borrowers in portfolio retention or triaging on the front end when loans come in, so that you only have so many LO resources deployed more efficiently and effectively, I see there's the response. So we've got a tale of two cities, right, coming up. If you're a literary guy buff, you've got the worst of times and you've got the best of times. I don't know if it's a K-shaped recovery. You know, that's subject to debate, but certainly there are, I think, one top 5 lender I was talking to. I actually talked to 2 of the heads of servicing, 2 top 5 lenders over the past 2 weeks. And the numbers were, you know, between the 2 of them, there was over 50,000 borrowers that didn't opt in, that there were forbearances that looked like they had already were going to be failures to flow into the system. So you've got that whole group of people that really need to be communicated very effectively, so we can help them with the best alternative as the moratorium burn off at the end of the year and then at the end of March, right? So you have those 2 waves, and we can use AI to do that decisioning, to make that outreach, and then when a human being comes on, to have access to all of the potential outcomes so they can communicate effectively. And I see that component for the people in distress. And obviously, with rates remaining low for the next couple of years, I think that seems like we're all pretty much in agreement on that. And there's a couple trillion more loans to do. That means a lot of volume, and being able to weed through it, pre-qualing a property for title, pre-qualifying a borrower for the lending standards will be helpful with AI. The other thing that is in this $1 trillion worth of loans we've done, how many rejections did we get? You know, how many, you know, let's take a product, Earl loans or whatever, VA loans, how many of those were rejected on a net benefit test? That if I could take that entire portfolio and rerun it, maybe with an alternative to title insurance, maybe with some other product that utilizes AI, maybe I can bring those loans back to life and you know, further enhance my profitability. All of that are things you can do with the knowledge base that's created behind the scenes that can work hand in glove with your servicing system or your origination system.
Thanks, Jim. So, Katherine, last question, and this question is asked of me and us often. Hey, I'm using XYZ loan origination system. It doesn't do what you say you can do. How do I access external IT solutions like AI and work in parallel to my LOS without changing my LOS, which I'm not happy with my LOS necessarily. However, I know I don't want to change it and go through that pain and suffering. So, you know, many of the lenders in the mortgage collaborative don't have a sophisticated chief digital officer like yourself with an extensive technology background and technology acumen. So they're relying on their LOS vendor. So if you're one of those companies, what would be a recommendation you could give those companies?
You know, I think this is one of the most difficult conversations to have. I bet you are asked this all day long, because it is amazing to me. Without looking at any one necessarily LOS, the sort of lack of responsibility of these companies over the years to not trend with the capabilities of technology, right? To where when the lowest common denominator across all of our teams is the LOS, and the responsibility for all of us to recognize where there is mass inefficiency, not because of our inefficiency or our inability to scale faster, but because of the technology's ability to optimize faster. We have to start to really say, okay, then what are the other options? And shame on them that we are having to ask this, not shame on you. So no, there might not be many companies with the technical skill that I have and my whole team that I've brought. It's not just me. But it's, don't get yourself so overwhelmed by not understanding it that you feel like you're at fault, because these other solutions are coming, and they're coming because they've been obvious for a long time. And I think that the biggest piece of this, I can't remember who said it, I think John, you said it, is that we didn't have a back end that would have ever bought this stuff anyway. Who cares if you had an e-note? Who cares if you had a RON? Who cares if if you e-disclose? You didn't have anybody buying that stuff if you could do it. So these fintech companies have been just waiting for a COVID, right? They've just been waiting for an opportunity like this. I don't think anyone wishes this year on anybody. And at the same time, what was the plan to get there, right? So since the lowest common denominator is the LOS, what you can start to do is say, how do we remove ourselves from it? First of all, you have expenses that are directly tied to it. Some of it may be annual expenses. You may be paying a patch every year to renew that has, you know, some sort of a batch upload capability connected to another tool, or has, you know, some sort of interfaces with other technology. You spend $5,000 a year on each of those patches, and then, you know, you're having to constantly sort of piecemeal all this data together. Well, one of the coolest things about capacity is that it has the ability to connect these dots. If you can bypass the LOS for information and only include relevant information from that, include relevant information as a direct spoke into this knowledge base, then you don't need to clunk up. First of all, it's making these LOSs very slow. And then you're having regular sort of integration and output of data into analytics platforms and all sorts of platforms, where if it doesn't have to be the core source of knowledge, it is just literally running decisioning and certain functionality, you know, they lose some of their traction and frankly, some better negotiation opportunities for us. And then we get faster, more dynamic, and exactly like Jim is saying, a leveling of our capabilities. So I think that it's a fair question, and I think the time has come and the tools are here.
Excellent point. And I think that, you know, the overall theme is, and this is not self-serving in any means, but, you know, I look at my 30+ year career, and technology was the driving force for affecting change in whatever I did. Bleeding edge 25 years ago, believe me, bleeding edge. But it was always technology that was solving the problem. So my suggestion would be to become more of a student of what technology capabilities are, not necessarily on Katherine's level of understanding how, you know, code works, but really understanding what solution capabilities are, what the cost-effective way for implementing that is, and how to get it implemented to get that lift, and how quickly can you get that burn rate. In other words, whatever you're spending on the tech, you get it paid back within a short period of time, and then it's gravy after that. These are all really solid questions you need to ask yourself as a lender, no matter what size you're in. So Tom, I'm going to turn it back to you. I think we're at the end of our timeline. I don't know if you have questions, if you want to continue, or if you want to shut down.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you both Jim and Katherine. Fantastic insights through the different questions and kind of taking us through how capacity has had such a positive impact on your organizations and leveraging time as money and really thinking smartly about how you organize for the future. You may see I wanted to bring it up because capacity did provide me this a while back. Just wanted to show some love for the corporate swag. It's one of the most comfortable pieces of clothing I have too, so kudos to you guys. And just a reminder out there to our attendees, I've got a couple questions lined up, but if you have any direct questions for Jim, John, or Katherine, great opportunity to submit those either via the chat or Q&A box here, and I'll facilitate those out on your behalf. First one I have here, and it's kind of directed for both Jim and Katherine. I guess, Jim, I'll start with you. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, having worked directly with capacity and witnessing the positive impact for your organization, are there now additional projects either for internal or external customers that you're looking to leverage capacity and the AI knowledge base technology for implementing?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is when you're an armchair technologist like myself, okay? The last code I ever did was Fortran way back in the day. So that tells you how old I am. When you're looking at it, yeah, when you see and you start to step back, if you have the time to do that in your organization and look at all the different handoffs or inefficiencies, some of which is just intelligent mapping of information from one place to another, might be across systems, but you can do that through a third-party AI. So what does that end up doing? Well, that ends up opening up a whole world of it. So let's look at just one example. So, John and I get started, we create knowledge base around the call center and the help desk functionality, right? You already heard what it can do from calendaring, scheduling, working in your system to focus your people on the profit questions and answers with customers. But I'm also, we've already got our next project kind of decked out in the legal space. So, being able to address incoming documentation, pull metadata off the documents, key up the responsiveness so I can focus my lawyers very efficiently and effectively. Or, for example, when I mentioned this kind of alternative to title insurance project, it's allowing me to have the full decisioning on the title, create an instant within minutes insurable decision, one that you can then put a commitment on or an alternative to title insurance, depending on the marketplace. And then that allows me to deploy services more cost effectively. So really those couple of projects have opened up the ability, and then I can come out to my lender clients and I can say, hey, lender partner, you want to leverage capacity. I want you to do more loans. Okay, so let's use AI to do some portfolio retention intelligence. Let's use some AI in our front end title piece. Let's create a joint venture and pay for it all for you. So I'm going to show up with some of my partners and as cost neutral, because I know all of my servicing clients have said the same thing. Yeah, we love it, but we have no money. No matter how good times are, there's no money for any of it, right? So I try to show up with the several different projects that are available with the ability to pay for them. So and that's where we've been effective with some of our lending clients, looking at all of the different services that are necessary for a loan to originate, to retain, et cetera, and then saying, how can we fund this for our client in partnership or with a third-party service? And I think we're thinking more holistically, but yes, one project definitely begets many more projects.
Jim, awesome perspective there. And I think that's a unique value proposition that you're framing up with your clients too, in conjunction, with the ongoing relationship with capacity.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what I think we were trying to get is like from you take away from a lot of these Q&A sessions, but you come away with, oh man, that sounds real great. Now I know who Jim is. Awesome. He talks about his bio. That's so sweet. But it was really to think about, okay, I'm a servicer. Or I'm an originator and I'm on Ellie Mae. Here's what I've got, right? So where can I go from here to gain a lift? how am I going to compete effectively? Like if you use all these tools on the front end and you validate all the data, think about this. Okay, now you're a mortgage originator. You've got warehouse lines. What it would be worth if I could turn a loan a week quicker? What if the longest pole in the tent was your disclosures? That's where we can move to. And that's real money in your pocket. Now, if we use AI and we digitize all that data and we keep it, then maybe we can turn our warehouse line almost like a utility and then further reduce the cost to us. Now we're as cost effective as the biggest bank, and we can use some of our aggregation of data validation to create a less risky product. I think it was, I don't know who said it earlier, but if you didn't embrace the change, your loans could become, now when everybody wants the data and you don't have it, your loans might even be sold scratch and dent. You might actually have poorer pricing when people really understand that we're digitizing data and the birthplace of the mortgage comes out of your LOS, does a digital closing, creates a digital asset to be sold, and ultimately, on a different servicing platform. So that very well could be the future.
In parallel to that, Tom, what we're doing very specifically with A-Law is we are automating pieces of his business. Jim's taking that savings and actually reinvesting in the next iteration of what we need to automate. And it's a discounted scenario for us because it's cheaper for us to continue to discount or to continue to automate in a long-term strategic plan. So I think the overall focus is you need to have a tactical focus of executing your business and paying your bills, but you have to have a strategic business plan that's in parallel to your tactical, that is investing in greater efficiencies and cost savings that you can use to tactically produce your widgets better and more effectively. Those two have to go hand in hand, strategic and tactical.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely smart perspective in the construct of your relationship where it's butting towards constantly looking at what is the next processes that we need to automate or leverage knowledge base for. To your point from earlier in the discussion, to stay on the forefront of where technology is heading instead of, trying to play catch up from behind.
But not for the sake of talking about how slick you are with technology. It has to be a measurable gain for your business. It's not a project. It has to be a measurable gain.
Yeah. There's also the other piece of it, which we didn't talk about, which maybe in a COVID environment, we might want to do too is, we talk about scalability, you think about I can scale up, scale down, but then there's actually what happens with human beings, right? Being more efficient and effective lets you weather some of these different, I hate to call a pandemic a setback, but a changing environment where you can maintain a certain staffing level through various demand levels and keep those key people fully engaged. The mortgage market does. I saw it, and we've all been through it. If you've been around the mortgage market for any particular amount of time, you've seen the expansion, you've seen the contraction, and then you've seen the human cost on people, their expectations and their families as you have to let them go. If you have to furlough people or you have to fire them, if you've had to do that, you've had the responsibility to all those families and people, I don't know about you, but it's the toughest, the biggest and toughest challenge for someone who cares about the people that they employ and those around them. So having this AI-driven scalability, not only does it give you the transparency and the compliance and helps you mine all of the value out of those loans, all of the energy generated by that loan, you can help capture, but it also helps you be more, I'll say a better steward of the people that are in your charge.
Great point.
This is, it's so great because you're at that visionary edge of this. And this is sort of the lender versus vendor conversation about this, you know what I mean? So the vendor coming in to say, this is today, and this is where we will be in 6 months. And this is sort of what you should, be striving for some immediate, recoup of all of this activity. But here's where the industry is headed, and this is where we're going to go over the next 3 to 5 years, right? today it is so all hands on deck just to try to get an integration between the very core competencies. You know, I just want, so we have Drive, which is our new IP phone system. And, you know, we got off of Ring Central for those that were on it, but mostly we're just on good old fashioned landlines. Like we'd say, oh, you want the Atlanta office? Here's the number. Good, have a good day. Like, so if I could just like, you know, say, you have a question, I don't care if it's internal, external, there it is, click to call, IP phones going, transfer out, you know, just what seems very obvious. And it's our absolute expectation in every other industry. If we call Expedia, I'm not like, what do you mean you don't work for Delta Airlines? I mean, we're like, get it done. I mean, I'm calling Expedia, right? I don't care who you have to go to. I don't know, and throw a rental car in there too from Hertz. You know, they're integrating with 9 million different resources, and we're like, Expedia, figure it out. But for some reason, we'll sit in this industry and go, oh, that's the Atlanta office of your same company. Okay, no problem. I'll call that number. And it's was a commonplace for consumers too. And I think that that's very much not the go forward. I think after this experience, the haves and the have-nots, there's going to be a gigantic gap, and people will drop right in the middle of a loan if they know that they can get a better experience somewhere else. And that's the real, you know, it's our job as lenders and then certainly as vendors to, we're really educating the market. You know, this is how you can do this now. Did you know you could click here and be done with your closing documents, right? It's like, wow. We're educating the title companies. We're educating our internal workforce. We are both fronting the expense of all of these things and educating the world on what this looks like going forward. So it's so mandated that we just start with that foundation. Get that all working right. Get some marketing automation out of there. Save your LOs one phone call. Save your customers that, you know, the need to have to wait on an answer for where they are in their loan. Let them log in immediately. Start with just the very basics. And then you can see what Jim is saying. This is going to infiltrate every single aspect of this industry. And it's not pie in the sky. It is here.
Last point too, the last thing an underwriter wants to do is to take a phone call about a deal, right? They want to just do their work. They want to decision loans. They want to look at missing data. And, you know, most companies want access to their loan officers for decision makers. So there's a great place for a knowledge base to be able to be a query, a bot, you know, and get those answers very quickly on the fly from a mobile phone, wherever you are, 24/7, without ever talking to an underwriter. Just a little example of that. So Tom, back to you again.
Yeah. Well, last question I've got, and John, I'm going to put this your way, just as we're coming up on the top of the hour. You speak to, you know, the ability to get up and running, and Katherine made a great point earlier about, you know, the efficiency of time and money and how we expect these processes to be automated. I frame it up for you in this way because a lot of common threads I hear from lenders right now is, you know, there's so much volume, I just don't have the time to think about this, or maybe I am interested in having the discussion, but only if you know, the solution out there is light on the heavy lifting from my perspective and timely in a perspective to deploy. So if you could quickly share for us, you know, for a mortgage lender, how quickly could they deploy capacities, AI technology to support the automation or knowledge base of internal or external customer processes?
So if we get a dedicated person that's working with us in weeks, you know, a month, you can get this thing stood up. And it really comes down to what system we need to connect to, what APIs are available, and what type of user acceptance testing you want to do before it goes live. The ones that use it internally can launch faster because it's like Microsoft in the late 90s. We basically fixed all their bugs for them, right? If it's an internal system, you can get it stood up pretty quickly and kind of sprint through the user acceptance testing. If it's external, you want to make sure that everything is accurate and mapped properly. But, you know, as far as Fannie, Freddie, USDA, FHA, VA, we've got all those guidelines. You know, it's just basically getting our system talking to your system. It's a pretty fast process, you know, weeks.
Excellent. No, I appreciate that. And since we're at the top of the hour, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. But, really, Katherine, John, Jim, I want to thank each of the three of you. This was a fantastic conversation. Really just appreciate you taking the time and the opportunity to kind of share the depth of your experience with working directly with capacity and sharing some examples for our fellow members on the line. Thinking on a different level about how and what they could be automating and leveraging knowledge base for within their operation, and not just applying it directly to the loan process, that there's this whole open field of opportunity to work smarter and not harder and be more efficient at the same point in time. So thank you, each of you. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank everybody for joining us as well. It's another great TMC Connect web broadcast, and hope you all stay well and stay sane out there and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, Tom.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.